we got to talk about Jim Knowles. We got to talk about him making the jump from the national championship winning Ohio State Buckeyes to, I guess you could call Ohio State fans wouldn't call Penn State a rival, but the other way around would definitely suffice. He takes a 3-year, $9.3 million deal to be defensive coordinator. $3.1 million a year, which is, from what I've read, more than most, if not all, G5 head coaches. It's just an insane amount of money. Basically, my question is Jim Knowles worth it? Mitch, we'll start with you.
Boy, I think he is. I've been one of his loudest supporters, I feel like, at least in our circles. When he left Oklahoma State to go to Ohio State, I was devastated for the Pokes. I was thrilled for the Buckeyes. And, he's got a reputation maybe as a little bit of a riverboat gambler with the number of blitzes that he brings and the kind of funkiness that he brings. But, then again, you watch the NFL and Steve Spagnuolo is doing the exact same thing and winning championships, right? And so for me, Spagnuolo and Knowles are kind of birds of a feather. I think this is a great hire for Penn State. I do think this absolutely puts James Franklin on the clock, though, to win a national championship. If you're going to pay for the best, if you're going to go out and get the best, then you had better deliver. And, defense has not been Penn State's real issue. Sure, in the biggest moments, maybe they've been run over by an Ohio State or by a Michigan. But by and large, it's been their offense has kind of disappeared in those big games. They haven't been able to keep up. So Knowles is going to take care of the defensive side of the ball. You look at what he did at Ohio State. He had them third last year, first overall in total defense this season. His results speak for themselves. So I think it's a home run hire on the defensive side of the ball, but now it really just shines the spotlight for me on the offensive side for Franklin.
Yeah, Mitch, Lance, how does the reaction from Ohio State Nation, what does that say to you? I mean, we obviously, you put out a video yesterday on the socials. We got a lot of comments from Ohio State fans trying to downplay it. Obviously, reports came out today, talking about, and there's been a lot of reports, but one came out today where, they were talking about how they asked Jim Knowles not to come to the championship celebration while he was trying to figure out what was going on in his personal life and what he was going to do. So
wasn't that Brett
give me the Ohio State perspective.
Yeah, wasn't that Brett McMurphy that reported that today?
Yeah.
Honestly, I wished I could say I was shocked, but I really wasn't. I really wasn't surprised of obviously with the Ohio State program. You're talking about arguably the most successful program in college football, like as far as longevity across the history of the sport. I mean, it doesn't really matter who's coached there. They're always one of the best programs, if not the best, in college football. Just their fan base, obviously, is pretty spoiled. And that's saying a lot here coming from an Alabama fan, I know. But the comments were incredible. Mitch, we had a few hundred comments between the post that we put out on Instagram and TikTok and talking about it on X. And the majority were just like, that's fine. He can leave. He wasn't that good anyway.
Acting like he wasn't worth anything. Like he didn't do anything while he was there.
Yeah, he wasn't that good anyway. Honestly, the majority, like I'm not talking about 3 or 4. It was like they all got together and said, let's all go comment the same thing and say the same stuff. Like maybe they all listened to the same Ohio State show and they heard this somewhere. I don't know. But they were all talking about how it took 3 years for him to implement his defense at Ohio State, for them to finally be any good. And the only reason they were any good was because of all of these elite players and elite playmakers that they had this year on defense. And it's one of those things that I've said a lot this year. I just think that two things can be true at the same time. Yes, Ohio State did have elite talent. They had great talent this year. But to knock Jim Knowles and to act like that he's not an incredible defensive coordinator and that he didn't do an elite job at Ohio State is just, to be honest with you, I just think that's a bunch of fans being butthurt that he's going to Penn State. I mean, you alluded to it just a minute ago, Mitch. When he was at Oklahoma State, they had a top 10 defenses last year there in 2021, and they tied the school record that year for the most wins in Oklahoma State's program history for winning 12 games that year. Ohio State in that same season was ranked somewhere in the 30s in scoring defense. Jim Knowles' first year, they were 17th. His second year, They were, one publication I saw had it second. The other ones had them as third overall in the country in scoring defense. And this past year, they were number one. So obviously that's progression, and that's a pretty significant improvement in his time there. So it was interesting to see the folks in Columbus and Ohio State fans just honestly not very grateful for the time that Jim Knowles spent there.
I raised my eyebrows when I saw the comments on your video because you guys put out great social content and get a lot of comments, but when I saw the number, I was like, that seems high and it had just gone out too.
Yep.
It was pretty quick that groupthink kind of took over in the comments. Total defense, to your point, Lance, the 4 years previous to Knowles taking over, 59th, 1st, 71st. So yes, Ohio State has fielded great defenses before Jim Knowles. Obviously, that's not the issue here. I think what Ohio State fans have just failed to realize over the last 3 years is like sacks have not been the end all be all. That's the number one thing that I've seen when people are complaining about Jim Knowles as well. They're not getting to the quarterback, right? They're in the backfield, they're getting pressure, but they're not actually getting to the quarterback. But I don't understand how you see the scoring defense continue to progress each year that he's there and not think, well, maybe sack isn't an end all be all, right? QB pressures oftentimes can be just as good, if not more beneficial than sacks, especially if you're forcing turnovers, right? So I don't understand, quite frankly, the camp that's saying, we're fine, be gone, we'll pick up right where we left off, because that is just not the case historically, statistically, or otherwise.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah, and I just think like you look at the identity of Ohio State before Jim Knowles came there, and it was a team who kind of, you thought had to win shootouts. You thought had to win, games high scoring with their offense. Obviously, the quarterbacks they've had, Justin Fields and C.J. Stroud, and those guys, and you just kind of looked at them, and he's helping change the identity of that team with their physicality and allowing 12 points per game and his defense wasn't the issue in that Michigan game, right? I mean, they allowed 13 points. So it's just it's a testament to what he's done there, what he did at Oklahoma State. Happy for the guy. He got rewarded. He gets to go back home kind of, to Philly. Yeah, like you said, Mitch, big hire by James Franklin. I personally think they could have spent some of that money on wide receivers. But, like you said, defense has never really been the issue. I mean, Big Penn State was number 6, number 7, somewhere around there as far as total defense this year. So, again, it shores it up though. And they like you said, they have no grounds to not try to expand on what they did this year, making it to the semifinals. So the pressure is definitely on James Franklin, probably for having one of, if not the best offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator in college football.